Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us for today's CCAD Knows Retail webinar. I'm Jen Schlieder. I'm Dean of Graduate Studies at Columbus College of Art and Design, a nonprofit art and design college that has been a creative force within Central Ohio for 140 years. And I want to welcome you to today's event, part of the CCAD Knows Retail webinar series, which features industry leaders who share their insight about the retail landscape and what's on its horizon. Before we jump into today's talk and I introduce our amazing speaker, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes. So first, we are recording today's talk so we can share it on our website for those who weren't able to join us, or if you want to go back and watch again later. Today's event is in a webinar format, and so all lines are muted and videos are off other than for us as the speakers. And we will be able to answer your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A function throughout the discussion to submit them, or the chat function to do the same. And now I want to introduce our speaker. Kate Maher has 13 plus years of experience in the creative industry as a multifaceted designer and leader. Currently Senior Director, Nike Direct Stores and Services, Jordan brand. Kate previously worked as Creative Director at Gensler, London, Senior Design Director for Adidas in Germany, and Design and Development Manager for ASICS in Amsterdam. Her clients throughout her career have included brands like Selfridges, Ferragamo, Starbucks, and the Tate Modern, and many more. And as the wonderful 2018 interview with her in Mind magazine pointed out, her childhood in rural Ireland, fused with her experience playing Division I basketball in the US and her decision to study architecture, have all built in Kate a jump right in attitude that she brings to everything she does. Please join me in welcoming Kate Maher.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I appreciate it. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm happy to share a little bit about how Nike creates the stores and services for retail, and give you a little bit of insight into how we do some of the magical work at Nike. And thank you, Jen, for sharing a little bit about my background. That saves me from having to go through it. As Jen said, I've worked for a variety of different brands, but most recently working predominantly in the sports industry. And obviously, as Jen talked about my sports background as well, that suits me very well. I'm very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate with how I've navigated through my career. I often start when speaking about myself with this sort of Venn diagram. I have a background in marketing and international business before I moved into architecture as a master's. And so very often I'll talk about myself kind of through these kind of left and right brained approach, very much around the art and the science of it. And I've always done pretty well living at that intersection between the art and the science. And finding yourself working in retail industry, in design, and in around like consumer behavior, I think that's really amazing, because at this same intersection of art and science is exactly where retail sits. And especially when you're working for a business like Nike, Nike, one of the best content creators in the world, one of the best marketing brands in the world, telling amazing stories around the power of sport to change people's lives and how you can make a huge difference in the world through sport. But beyond that, working in retail, we also have a business to run, and we work in retail to help generate revenue for the brand and for the business. And so really and truly, retail is absolutely sitting at that intersection of art and science. How do we tell the best brand stories? How do we bring those stories about human potential and achievement and sport legacy to life to win the hearts and minds of our consumer base? But also the science of it. We're dealing with things right now during the pandemic, such as supply chain issues, logistics. How do we keep our store staff safe while working during a pandemic? What do we do when we don't have enough stock arriving on time? How do we keep our consumers satisfied? How do we maintain that loyalty and love for the brand in difficult times like this? And so retail is really on the front lines of a brand and a business like Nike. And it's our job in creating those retail environments and consumer experiences to do justice to both sides of the art and the science of retail and what that means for a brand, a business, and a consumer or a participant in that experience. And so before I get into the full blueprint, I'm just going to share a video clip here that gives you a little bit of an overview of the type of stores and the type of work that we're doing here at Nike today. And I hope that that played okay on your end. Sometimes it can be difficult with the video and the sound quality. But I wanted to show you that so that you got a bit of a sense of context as I take you through kind of a breakdown of how we go about creating concepts like what you have just seen. For us, it's no surprise, I guess, in some ways, and it may sound simple, but really we have to start with why. Why are we creating these stores? What are we trying to achieve with them? What is their purpose? And so for us, it's very important that we start at that point. And I think that's the same for, honestly, for any brand out there or for anybody looking to go into retail. You must be able to define your own individual why. What are you trying to achieve? And that could be, for many businesses out there, it's about sales. We're trying to achieve sales, and it doesn't really go much further than that. That said, a lot of businesses or brands that are out there just trying to achieve sales may be struggling, to be honest. Consumer behaviors and attitudes are changing. Consumers are looking for more from brands than just sales. Consumers are looking to align their own loyalties with brands or with retailers that have a shared purpose or vision or understanding. Of course, your smaller local convenience store might be a little bit different. There, I'm looking for convenience only. It's close to my house, and I'm happy to go in and pick up and get what I want and get out. But for a business like us, that is not enough. It could be about mind share or sharing a vision or a view onto your brand. Really, it could be about getting people to understand what your brand is all about. So you want to use your retail environment to be able to tell those compelling stories, to be able to explain possibly benefits of the product that you're trying to sell to consumers. It could also be beyond that, about education and guidance around something. It may not actually be about selling at all, but you may have, for example, a pop-up retail environment that's just about sending a message. And finally, I think at the end of the day, probably the most important one is about loyalty and kind of getting consumer to love your brand. Very much the business that we're in is very much about going after those love hearts. We want people to fall in love with our brand, fall in love with making sport a daily habit. And we want to educate and guide our consumers to be able to make sport a daily habit. Our belief is that if we do that, and if we're able to empower and inspire our consumers, they will ultimately, when it comes time for purchasing a sneaker or purchasing a running tight, they will come back to Nike because of that affinity, because of that shared sense of how we view the world, how we see the world, and how it makes us feel, our perception on that. So I would say for anybody out there thinking about creating a retail environment, you must be authentic to you, your brand, and your why, and you must start there. For us at Nike, our why, ultimately we're creating new retail concepts to build brand equity and continue to push the edges of retail. So really about the brand side of things and the business side of things, the art and the science. And beyond that, we're doing it to evolve and keep pace with the consumer and their needs within the marketplace. And you'll have seen in some of those videos the amount of digital integration that exists inside of a retail environment these days. Digital has been on, I'm sure you've heard from some of the other speakers ahead of me. Digital is really driving a lot of the transformation in retail. And during the pandemic, the last year and a half, that has only accelerated like fivefold. And digital allows us to essentially get access to anything almost anywhere. And with that, it has increased our sense of demand. We want things faster, we want it quicker, we want it more convenient, we want it at the touch of our finger. And if I want it from my sofa, I want to buy it from my sofa. And so ultimately, we need to be able to create a retail environment that is able to bring that online and offline, digital and physical world together. Also, our consumers are just becoming more demanding in general around innovation, product, technology, wanting the best product to help them support their individual needs and goals. So it's also very critical that we're able to tell those stories about our new innovations and bring those to life in a tangible and realistic way so that the consumers can understand the benefits of one product over another product. Beyond that, when we talk about keeping pace with the marketplace and the industry, a big shift that we have noticed over the recent years is that shift from creating a retail environment all about what it looks like. It used to be, back in the day, I guess when first retail started, it was open a door, put product on the shelf, sell it. And then over time, it was like, yeah, maybe if my store and my environment is a little bit nicer, it'll help to sell my product a little bit better. We're way past those days now. So for us, very much deciding what the store looks like is almost like secondary. It used to be that we would start there about creating this compelling environment. Now it's very much about how it behaves. And so it's about getting under the skin of how we want the store environment and the experience to ultimately behave. And that informs what it will ultimately end up looking like. So it's what it looks like and how it behaves. And that's the big shift that we've seen over recent years. The second the second point on the blueprint is who. It's very important as well to understand who you're serving. Who is my audience? Who am I trying to reach? Where are they and how can I reach them? What are their needs? Am I targeting a very specific individual muse or profile? And often we will do this. Brands and businesses will identify a muse or a profile of the type of consumer that they're trying to reach, and try to learn everything about that consumer themselves as an individual and serve that individual need. It could also be a cohort, like it's a diverse group. It has more than just kind of one dimension to the consumer. And it could be about serving like a broader base. Serving a broader base means a little bit more complexity, because you may then need a few different store types or a few different retail environments to be able to achieve your goals, based on serving your nuanced consumer needs. The other audience that we need to think about today as well is that virtual or digital audience. Physical stores are no longer just physical. They're actually a platform for connection out to a broader audience. And so when we talk about keeping pace with the marketplace and the consumer needs and how they've changed, this is a constant piece in our mind now, is who is that non-physical audience that's still using a physical brick and mortar retail environment to serve their individual needs and purpose. So that's another consideration of when we create the retail environment, how are we considering that remote consumer that is still considering this store potentially their local store, even though it could be miles and miles away from their home.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. Lots of children have no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. That's not all of it, but it is something to really, really feel.
We don't blame you. You want to be just like us, fearless like us. Us ballers, artists, designers, and believers. I think you call us phenoms. We call it a new era, a redefinition of style, of success, of game, of greatness. We welcome the highs and the lows, but for us, the L's are lessons. Then we become the teachers. We're not just here for ourselves. We're keeping the next generation under our wings. We're trying to level up the conversation to level the playing field. You can't divide us, but you can count on multiplication. When our attention, we only hear real talk, only feel real relationships. We want guidance against the gravity of the planet, but also the space to do us. You don't want us to be you, do you? Us neither, but only because we're trying to take it a step further, trying to pass on a new vision of the game, of the world. Everyone deserves to fly. But we're not all fly until we all fly. Keep up.
I pressed that video a little bit quickly. I didn't really introduce it well. That is a video of our Jordan target consumer, an ARM use group. And for us, we call this cohort the fearless ones. And that video is a representation of their needs, their wants, their desires, their attitudes. This takes a lot of consumer research to be able to create even a mood short video like this. So we really need to understand our consumers, spend time with our consumers, interview those consumers, go to their homes, go to their neighborhoods, get a really solid understanding of what their expectations of the brand are, why they have an affinity for the brand, what they would like to see more of from the brand, and how can we as a brand help them achieve their own goals. And so every year we spend lots of dollars and lots of time with our consumer to really try to know our consumer, to understand our consumer, to be able to better serve our consumer. That relationship is even going steps further now, where we co-create ultimately with our consumers. So we're using their insights, their feedback, their requests to help determine what product we create, how we create it, and where we can serve them best. And so it's critically important for any brand to truly understand and spend as much time as you can trying to understand your consumer. This is going to be key. If you don't know who your consumer is, how do you know who you're serving? How do you know if what you're serving is the right thing to be serving? You have no real baseline for understanding what's working, what's not working, and why it's working or why it's not working. So who you're serving is a super critical piece of creating a stores and services experience blueprint. The third point is where. We got to talk about location. In both of the videos I've shown you now, you'll have seen a diverse set of consumers in different cities around the globe. Nike is a huge global brand. We're spread in every geography, every continent. And so it's critically important that we also understand the nuanced behaviors of our consumer. Not all consumers behave the same way, interact the same way, have the same amount of disposable income, have the same needs and desires from the brand. And so that can be very challenging to try to understand how to temper and balance. We're one brand, we're multidimensional, but we want to have a level of consistency as we present ourselves out there in the marketplace to our consumer. So we have to really understand and get really clued into where we want to go. Beyond that, where we actually choose to open stores and locate our stores can also be, again, right at that intersection of the art and the science. We want to use as much data as we can to inform where we should locate a specific store. We want to understand how much of our target consumer base is living in that area. Nowadays, we can also start to understand how much of their needs can be served digitally, how much of them need to be served physically, what distance are consumers willing to travel. We also sell our products in other environments as well. So in multi-brand environments, and in the States, you could see it as Dick's Sporting Goods or in Nordstrom or in Foot Locker. So it's really also critically important that we understand the other points of distribution of where our product is being sold so that we can best place ourselves in that ecosystem. And where as well, when you're thinking location, you want to think, am I opening a standalone mono-brand store that's going to be my own Nike store with no other product in that environment? Even in our case, we'll ask ourselves, is it an environment that has Nike and Jordan in there together, or is it Nike and Jordan separate? Nike also owns Converse, and so we have Converse stores as well. So it's critically important that we understand where we're going with what product. It could be, a brand is also opening a little pop-up or a kiosk type of location. We often do this as well as a test to inform a more permanent location. So understanding where you're going to open that test location, often we're doing that to test foot traffic, to get a better understanding of is there enough demand in that area for us to make a decision to put a long-term store there. Sometimes we also test actually in partner locations. So like in something like a Nordstrom as well. If there's enough demand at a somewhere like that, we then may determine to open our own store nearby to help serve our consumers in a more direct way without a middleman in between sometimes. It really depends on, is it a consumer that we think we can reach on our own, or is it a consumer that maybe is more typically shopping in somewhere like Nordstrom and they wouldn't naturally think to come to a Nike store, or they may want to be in an environment where they can compare brands and products. So it also makes sense for us to potentially show up in that environment as well. And again, you guessed it, I'm going to talk about digital. Nowadays, we also want to think about how much of our location is digitally powered, digitally connected, and data driven. And so, very often we'll have consumers buying online, but picking up the product in store because they still want to go in, try it on. And then if they don't like it, then it's there. Or if there's something wrong with the size and they need to swap that out, they can do that. We'll often have consumers also buying online and returning a product in store. You can also go online and reserve a product and find the closest location to you to go see if it's in stock and go pick it up there. So this where is becoming very broad these days for someone like Nike globally all around the world, across digital and physical. The other thing that's really important as well, because we are a big global brand, is to make sure that we are contextually and authentically and genuinely showing up in local neighborhoods and local environments. And so for us to really resonate with those nuanced local consumers, we also want to make sure that we're able to have a level of flexibility and adaptability to be able to plug into that integrated neighborhood in the best way possible. And so some of the considerations we have when looking at a location is obviously the site selection itself, how we're going to tailor the product mix and the assortment to better serve that demographic that's there. How are we going to engage local community? How do we invite them in? We want to move beyond just transaction, but also into experiential. So how can we engage that local community in more ways beyond selling products? Some things we do as well are local partnerships and experiences. So we also want to help other businesses grow. And so we often will connect with local entrepreneurs or influencers or stylists or fitness trainers and have those guys partner with us at a given location to be able to deliver certain services and experiences. And this is beneficial both ways. You know, often these smaller individuals wouldn't be able to reach an audience like Nike can. And for us, we like to benefit from that local knowledge, that local insight, that local network. And so we find a great way to partner to be able to deliver and show up best for the consumer. Other things can be local marketing. We have to think about also how we change our tonality a little bit. Obviously, languages change, the way in which consumers want to be spoken to and engaged with, and the etiquette of consumer can be quite different by each geography. The way in which consumers wear their clothes. Sometimes it can be just a style thing. It can be a local influence thing. Sometimes it can actually be a religious or a belief system, and so certain modesty. And so there's a lot of different things as well in terms of how we can represent ourselves and present our products in a way that resonate with the local consumer. Also linked to local recommendations, which tend to come from the local staff. The staff in the store, I cannot speak highly enough and, you know, really impress upon you the importance of the staff. At the end of the day, I'm coming to a physical environment for an in-person real life experience. And your store staff or your brand ambassadors in that moment, they are the personification of your brand. And so it's also super important that we're hiring the right staff, that the staff are empowered to do their job well, and that the staff are actually able to deliver those services and experiences in an educated, in an authentic, and in a credible way. And so this is really, really important that we're able to make sure that we have the right hiring practices, that we have the right training collateral, and that our store staff are continuously educated and updated around our products, our services, and our experiences, so that they're best able to represent the brand, but more importantly, best able to serve the consumer themselves. Fourth one, what are we actually going to end up creating? So I've talked now about you know, what it looks like and how it behaves. So it's really, really important that we're thinking about what experience do we want to deliver, what types of experiences do we want to deliver, and as such, then what type of environment is needed to be able to house those experiences and those individual services. And again, online to offline, I can't talk about this enough. Very often, you know, you have a store environment or a retail environment that, of course, at a baseline, you know, we have products that are merchandised in a store. Usually, you know, it's a seasonal type of an approach. So products in our types of seasons kind of sit in a store for about 13 weeks before they're changed out. Of course, some fresh product comes in between. But when we're trying to engage consumers more frequently and do things beyond transaction, we also need to almost think of the store environment as an event space. And so we will have a host or a concierge in our store environments, and we will have a calendar of events or experiences that prompt and trigger and invite consumers to come back in and spend more time at our brand. And very often those are not related to product sales at all. It can be about guidance, it can be about running. Of course, we have the Nike Run Club, the Nike Run app, and the same with the training app. And so we want to be able to engage our consumers in sport, ultimately laddering back up to our larger mission of making sport a daily habit. And so the store environment can also facilitate these types of experiences in the environment as well. And again, the online to offline piece here in terms of what we're actually going to deliver. If we want to host an event or an experience in a store, we need to be able to reach and communicate to that audience that wants to come. It's the same thing if you're throwing a party. You need to go through your contact list. You need to invite them. Am I going to send an email? Am I going to text message? Am I going to call them? Am I going to send something in the mail? Very much of our communication now is taking place over digital. So the store heavily relies on the mobile device, and the mobile device heavily relies on the store. So these two are massively connected and intertwined. And honestly, in our world, one doesn't exist without the other anymore. And so it's critically important when we're creating these retail stores and we have these ideas about service and experience, we need to go to other functions in our business and we need to talk to those guys about the digital product that we're going to use, and how can we leverage that digital product and how can we connect with our consumers. And so that's why we have Nike membership. So if you are a member of Nike, you will sign up and you'll give us your contact information. That way we can actually reach you and to invite you to a service or an experience or an event. There's also other benefits and conveniences around it, like receiptless returns, and you get an extra trial period with your product where you can take it home and try it out and still be able to return that product. So there's a lot of benefits of the membership piece as well. But again, our main method of communication when you're not physically in the space is through that online to offline mobile connection. This video here, I put this in because, and this one doesn't have sound on purpose, but this is our House of Innovation store in Paris. And I think House of Innovation does a really good job of representing everything that I've spoken about so far. And you really see this physical and digital integration in the store through storytelling, through online to offline logistics. We have a variety of services and experiences in the store as well, including things like Nike by You, where you can customize your own product. The benefit of a lot of digital in the store environment as well is our ability to change stories quite quickly. We have a lot of stories to tell, which is great. Working in the sports industry, you have new content created every minute around the world, be it something LeBron James did or something Ronaldo did, or something any athlete has done, ultimately Serena Williams. So how can we tell these stories more rapidly in the retail environment and in a more timely fashion? We also have to offer other services, like here we're seeing BraFit, that offer more convenience to the consumer, better product guidance. If consumers are able to find that better fit of product, it's less likely the product gets returned as well. So we also want to be thinking about things like that. Sustainability, we know the fashion industry and the clothing industry isn't the most sustainable out there. So we want to also do our part in contributing to sustainability and telling stories about how much of our retail environment is made from sustainable materials. Also giving consumers the opportunity to return their products, refurbish their products, continue the life cycle of their products. Yeah, I hope you find that example useful to be able to illustrate the variety of different things that we've spoken about so far. And then there's like the so what. How will you know if it's successful? What are the key performance indicators going to be? How will we measure success? Ultimately, this comes back to the first thing I said about why. What's your purpose? If you know your purpose, you should be able to determine how you want to measure your success. Am I going to measure it on sales, revenue, sell-through, traditional retail KPIs? Am I going to measure it on impressions? How many social media impressions? How many people are talking about our brand? How is our brand perceived? Is it the most innovative brand in the world? Is it the most sustainable brand in the world? Is it the most convenient brand in the world? And then, of course, sentiment. What are consumers saying about our brand? How loyal are our consumers? How frequently do they come back and spend time with us? Our members, they're very engaged consumers, and our members spend a lot of time with our brand, both online and offline. And so that helps us also to better understand our consumer, to have a direct dialogue with our consumer, to be able to hear feedback from our consumer, and then to be able to act on that feedback. And so honestly, at Nike, we will use every single possible way to measure our success, from a financial standpoint, from an impression standpoint, a perception standpoint, a loyalty and engagement standpoint. And so really we're looking at an ecosystem of measurements to be able to determine if we are successful or not. Of course, we also want to be profitable. And so we continue to strive to do that. And so we're always looking to optimize, get a bit leaner, be more sustainable, do the right thing, and be able to offer like convenience to our consumers as well. So this is an ongoing, I would say, I guess, challenge for improvement and continuous improvement. And this one never stops in terms of, we know we can always do better. We know we can always improve. It's a constant challenge for all of us every day when we show up to work. So ultimately, if I summarize the blueprint, we got to start with the why. You got to know your why, and you got to be able to clearly stay true to that why. When you get lost, you go back to the why. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? How much do I know about my audience? How can I learn more about my audience? How can I be more connected to my audience? How can I speak more directly to my audience? How do we stay more engaged and connected? And how can I better serve my audience? That should be my main goal the entire time, how to better serve my audience. If I'm better serving my audience, I'm ultimately better serving my brand and better serving my business. Where? You know, everything from where in the globe to where in the city to where on the street to where in the shopping mall. The location is going to be really, really critical. You want to be located where your consumers are. You want to be able to reach them. You want to be in their path. And so it's critically important of understanding the consumer to understand where to go and meet them. What are you going to deliver? You know, that's when now you really need to be based on why I'm doing it, who I'm doing it for, where is it? Okay, so what can I actually deliver? What type of experience is required here? What type of environment is required here? What type of execution level is required here? As again, I said, it's still a business. So very often you want to be looking at different ways in which we can serve different consumers at different price points in different locations. So you can't really determine the what without understanding why, who, and where. And then the so what, the KPIs, we want to be constantly measuring our success and our failures so that we can have this continuous improvement of getting better, serving our consumers better, and obviously serving our brand and business better at the end of the day. And yeah, so that takes me to the end of the presentation. You know, earlier when I showed that first video, it showed, you know, 4 concepts in the video. Each concept is designed a little bit differently. They have different location strategies. They have different target consumers. The product assortment is a little bit more localized and dialed. And so even in Nike, a brand like us, we're one brand, but even in the Nike brand, we have different concepts to be able to serve our consumer base in slightly different ways. We also have a Jordan concept beyond this. We also have a Converse concept beyond this. But for the sake of today, I just thought it'd be tighter to stay focused on these 4 to illustrate what I've spoken about today. So I hope you found this useful, and I'm hoping there's some questions in the chat so that we can talk a little bit more.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much, Kate. I appreciate it so much. Yes, folks, go ahead and submit your questions as you have them. And here's where I would love to start, if we could. I'm thinking about how much you underscored the importance of service and experience in the broader blueprint. And I'm also thinking about your own background in architecture. And I think it's fair to say that architects aren't known for thinking first about service or experience necessarily. And so I'm wondering what it is that you sort of had to learn on the job, or what you sort of, what influences sort of came towards you as you were moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think more recent times, architects aren't necessarily known for that. I think if you go back to the beginning times of architecture, way back at the beginning, you know, architects were essentially Renaissance people. They were multifaceted. They were able to do a variety of different things. They had a variety of different interests, from the art and the science component of it. We have architects in our history that went to the nth degree designing the fork that was in the drawer, very much honed in on the end user's behavior and how they would interact in the space. And ultimately, service and experience is really about that, how somebody is going to interact within the space. Of course, it goes beyond the building, the structure, the staircase, but we very much plot a consumer journey based on the end user's expected behavior in the space, much like you would plan a building in general, of like the arrival, the transition from one room to the next, how you feel, how you behave. In terms of my own experience, I think it's because of the overlap in the background between architecture and design and marketing and business. So I probably kind of come at it from a slightly different angle. And then because I've worked in different industries, in the beginning, I actually worked more in hotel and hospitality industry. And I loved that. I mean, if you think about it, a hotel, in a store, I only have maybe a consumer for 15 minutes. So I have X amount of interactions. In a hotel, I could have you for a week. And at the end of the week, you've had, I don't know, hundreds of interactions with people inside of the hotel. And forget just your week in the hotel. It started when you went online to book a hotel and you were thinking, I'm going to the city for this reason, I need this type of a hotel. And you almost forget about the hotel till you kind of pull up in the Uber outside the hotel or get out of the metro and you're looking for the hotel. And then you're like, oh yeah, I remember this is why I booked this hotel. You walk into the lobby, you're like, yeah, this is the lobby, this is great. You stand in the line. If the line is long, you're upset. If the line is short, you're happy. You get your key, you go into the elevator, you go upstairs, you put the key in the door, it doesn't work. Now I'm annoyed. This service doesn't work and I just want to get into my room. You know that feeling, you got to go back downstairs, get the key checked, go back up to the room. And that's just your first kind of phase of interaction for maybe a couple of days. And so I think I learned a lot from working in the hospitality industry as well, of trying to consider every single touch point, every single friction or convenience, every single micro moment that can determine whether I had a positive or negative experience. And so really it's about empathizing with your consumer, putting yourself in their shoes. I mean, we're all consumers ourselves, right? So we all shop at these different places or go to retail. And so I think it's trying to predict and deliver against what could be an optimized experience.
Yeah, I love it. Well, on this count, we have a participant who's asking if you can tell us about an amazing customer experience that you had recently and what for you made it amazing.
Amazing customer experience recently. Well, I wish I haven't been traveling as much as what I'd love to be. Normally I get to travel a lot, but in the summer I was home in Europe and I went to Amsterdam, and there's a new House of Rituals in Amsterdam. Rituals is a kind of I guess they started as like kind of a soaps and lotion kind of a brand, but they've managed to pivot really, really well into wellness and mindfulness, and they've created a House of Rituals that's around mind, body, and soul. So there is definitely a retail component to it. There's actually a dining component to it. There's a whole kind of like spa and mindfulness floor. They've invested a lot in technology in terms of how you can take micro breaks from our busy lives today, where you can get like a 10-minute meditation or decompression chamber. And so I actually was just really impressed with how the brand had gone from like maybe a smaller brand that just appeared to have these kind of lotion and soap stores into a brand that was understanding how consumers' needs are changing in these like hectic urban environments, to be able to create an experience that honestly was just pretty delightful. When you came in off a busy commercial street and you got to just go in, it felt like it really did feel like bliss when you went in there. So I was pretty impressed with that one. But beyond that, my normal answer is usually Apple. I still think Apple does such a great job. They've broken down the traditional boundaries of retail. They've continued to optimize and refine. Their stores don't look dramatically different, but every single tiny detail is considered, and they've continued to get better and better and better at it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, now this one is getting into more specifics. Can you share if the use of the digital capabilities like hold product for try on or bring to dressing room have proven successful for your brand and continue to be evaluated for relevance?
Mm. Yeah, that's something that we continue to measure. You know, the consumer behavior in different marketplaces is very different on that. So what may be you know, highly engaged with in North America may not be in China or vice versa. We continue to measure it. To be honest, it depends on your consumer base. I think if your store is a lot of tourist traffic or first-time visitors, they tend to use it less because they don't know about it, or they didn't book it, or they don't have the app downloaded. Whereas if it's a repeat consumer, they tend to use it more, where they're a little bit more prepared on their shopping journey. They have an awareness of the service and experience, and they're more likely to engage. But that's why, you know, we have a few different concepts that do a few different things so that we can actually flex and adapt depending on consumer need.
Love it. Well, then what do you feel right now is the potential of customers or members co-creating with Nike as the brand, maybe even like beyond customizing the products, though I'm sure that's part of it.
Yeah, we are actually heavily invested in this, from content creation and story creation as well. You know, especially younger generations, so much into like gaming, Roblox, NFTs, all this sort of stuff. You know, sport has always had a big overlap with music, and music has always had a big overlap with art. And so we tend to live in those spheres we see between sport, music, art, but also then health and wellness and fitness. And so we're in a very unique place where we're constantly using consumers or members to co-create those different services or these different interactions or even content around these. So ultimately, I think we could see ourselves getting to a place where we're ultimately a platform. Yes, we create like products and content, but really we're kind of like an open source platform where we're able to connect a lot of different consumers to each other through Nike. And so I think that's kind of where the world is going, and that's probably where we're going, a little bit organically, a little bit like strategically, but also consumer behaviors are changing so rapidly. We're trying to, like I said, keep pace with it and try to stay ahead of it, but we need to be learning from our consumers, which means co-creating with them. So yeah, it's happening all the time.
Yeah, oh, that makes so much sense. And the notion of with sport, art, and music all sort of pull together towards this kind of platform is really exciting.
Yeah.
All right, so when you're making future forward choices for the brand, what's your deciding factor? The questioner is suggesting things like strategy, passion, gut, but I wonder what it is for you.
Yeah, I think like with experience, you can develop a little bit of a gut, but you don't want to rely on it on its own. You can have a good feeling, but we're very much in a space now that's very data driven. We have access and more access to our audiences than ever before. We have more access to data than ever before. So it really, really is becoming, and it sounds redundant, but it is at that intersection of the art and the science of it. And so also we're a big business, right? So I'm like one of like thousands of talented people. And so I'm learning every day from other people as well who have more experience than I have. And also learning from a 13-year-old consumer. We were just doing focus groups this week. And I have to say last week as well, you're just very entertained to some degree by their insight and how they perceive something and the way in which they communicate it, but also learning a lot about what's important to them. And they're ultimately the future of our brand. So if I'm talking to an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, they're our future, while also thinking that my dad is still a consumer. So you're bridging this gap. And so you have to move at an okay rate that you don't lose anybody. And so you want to be able to say, okay, I have a loyal base that I've had for a long time, and I have a new emerging base. So how do we create things to keep that spectrum engaged, and how do we serve them all essentially in a way? So it is definitely a mixture of data, strategy, passion, and gut. It's getting that recipe right, and we don't always get it right. I don't always get it right, but the good thing with retail is there's always another store, so you get another chance. So
That's perfect. And that feels like a great place for us to bring this conversation to a close today. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kate. And for the folks who are with us now, if today's talk resonated with you and you want to learn more about how you can be one of the leaders who shape the future of retail, who think about things like service and experience and platforms, you can check out CCAD's Master of Professional Studies in Retail Design, which is launching in January 2022 with our first cohort that I am so excited to share with the world. And if you enjoyed today's lecture, I want to share it with a friend. We'll have a recording available on that website in the coming days. Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.